Now is the moment of the next keynote speech with Munish, Khurana, Senior Manager, ATM OTM Business Development of Eurocontrol. Munish is a great friend of DTA who continues to inspire and guide European dynamics about USA development. I call here Munish. Welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's just about good morning, and then hopefully it will be lunch soon. So I am the last person, along with my panel, in between now and your lunchtime. So we're going to try and make this thing a bit more interesting, just to see if you can stay up until lunchtime. I'm delighted to be here. I remember the stage last year. It was a great event, very nicely delivered, good discussions. It really highlighted the spirit of Bari and, of course, Puglia in general. And I'm really delighted to be here today to share our thoughts with you. My name is Munish, Khurana. I work for Eurocontrol, and Eurocontrol is in the business of safety of air navigation. We work with a lot of the people that you have already seen and heard this morning, and some of the people who are actually going to be on the panel. But before we start the panel, I wanted to first build on what previous presenters and panelists have already highlighted. Today, we stand here where a lot of good things have happened in the innovative air services industry, and more things have yet to be done. We have drone regulations which have been out, and we've got U-Space regulations which came into force on the 26th of January this year. That was a key moment where member states across Europe started to put together an ecosystem, a national ecosystem, to try and implement U-Space. EU Drone Strategy 2.0, previous presenters also highlighted it, was released on the 30th of November of last year. And essentially, it comprises of three elements. Innovative air services, which is all about small drones that are used in surveillance, in inspections, in maintenance, in delivery of small cargo. Innovative air mobility is essentially about the use of eVTOLs and air taxis for mobility of humans and cargo. And U-Space, the digital platform that we need to manage the traffic, both integrated with ATM, the air traffic management, and the drone traffic in UTM. So the EU drone strategy, just for those of you who don't know, resulted in 19 flagship actions. And some of those actions were highlighted in the previous presentation as well. Essentially, it talked about trying to create a synergy between the civilian world, the military, and the security apparatus in Europe. The military has a lot of capabilities in this area where they have a lot more operational hours that the civilian world doesn't. So we must learn from them. The civilian world has a lot more U-Space, new innovative U-Space technologies that the military can benefit from it. So there needs to be a connection between the two. And with the EU Drone Strategy 2.0, I'm pleased to say the intention is to bring it all together. In fact, based on some of the work that is ongoing, I know that we have European Defence Agency representatives sitting there, Joao from works in Brussels with us. We are already working closely to try and bring the two together. That's all from the supply side of the innovative air services. But what about the demand? In the previous two presentations, you saw some use cases that previous presenters highlighted, whether it's in farming or it's in delivery of essential services, such as the police, surveillance by police, or delivery of medical services, as the previous speaker highlighted, up in Scotland, where Skyports delivered during COVID, did some demonstrations of delivering clinical samples from laboratories from mainland Scotland to the Isle of Mull, which is the west of mainland Scotland, resulting into now a more dedicated service. Postal service in Switzerland, for instance, as well as other countries. Maintenance of assets, whether it's the bridges and so on and so forth. So there is demand, but I believe that there are known knowns that we are talking about today, but actually the proportion of the known unknown is quite high. I give you an example. I come originally from telecom sector. Started my career at Motorola way back in late 90s. In those days, telecoms was just coming out, and there were some known use cases for telecommunications as well as the walkie-talkies, as we called it then. But look now, your mobile phone that you have, well, it's almost become your life. You can't live without it at the moment. And I'm sure you'd agree with me that if you look at the use of a mobile phone, perhaps you don't use the mobile phone just for calling each other. Some people would argue they use it more for taking pictures, and others would argue they use it more for checking their social media and emails and so on. Take the example of internet when it came. It would probably embarrass me, but I'll say it anyway. In those days, it was called superhighway, information superhighway. I think if you use that term now, you demonstrate your age. But look where internet is today and how we can't live without it. How much it offers and how much more it can offer. So there is an argument. There is an argument, ladies and gentlemen, that once the innovative air services, the drone service market is up and running, and once the innovative air mobility market is up and running, no doubt those use cases that we're talking about today will become visible, and they'll hopefully be making commercially viable businesses. But I believe a lot more will come up. So there's a lot more that we don't know yet. One of the areas that we often worry about, and a big challenge, is acceptance of public in the use of drones. Now, it's been talked about in the past. We will talk more about in the panel with us, but let me share my personal view and my professional view with you on that one. And I'm going to use an example to demonstrate public acceptance and how it can be influenced. During COVID, as you know, we all went through a pretty hard time. People who were in their vulnerable age group suffered a lot more than others. There were times and there were places where they couldn't even step outside their house to go and buy groceries. At that stage, there was an entrepreneur in Ireland by the name of Bobby Healy who started a business called Mana Drone Services. Those who are in the business would know this company well. I use this example because I feel this is the best example for understanding public acceptance and what it really, really means. So in that little village in Galway in Ireland, where vulnerable people, majority of the population in that village, they couldn't go to the supermarket to buy their groceries. So a business was established by this company to effectively gather their requirements using your mobile phone on an application, and then for drones to deliver groceries close to their houses, which saw them through the COVID period. Now, move the video forward, and after COVID, they went back to the community and asked them, should we stop? Is it a problem? What do you want us to do? And the response was an overwhelming, please continue. Because the community understood, although it was in difficult situations, such as COVID, the use of drones, but once they understood the use of drones, they then did a mathematical equation in their head, effectively, What is it that I lose? I lose my privacy, perhaps. I lose I get some noise pollution, some visual pollution. But on the other hand, I gain something which helps me to lead my life and perhaps offer new opportunities that I didn't know earlier. And that's continuing. And therein lies an example of public perception. Another example is in a CESAR project. One of the CESAR projects recently concluded. They did a survey with a group of community of people based on a survey, and they found what the perception of the public was, particularly within that random sample of people, of drones. And then they invited those people to stay as part of the CESAR project demonstration, to see the tests, witness them, ask questions, talk to the experts. And then they did the same survey again, and the results were different. Some people say seeing is believing. I think it is. I think when people see what they get and what they lose, they'll be in a better position to understand what they accept and what they reject. So the message that I'm trying to give is that we know about the demand, but there's a lot of latent demand which is hidden. It hasn't come out yet. We need to start. One of the previous panelists was absolutely right. I think it was Marco who said that a lot is being said about optimistic message about the way drone services and the drone service market is going to occupy and deliver services. He's absolutely right that there is a lot of optimism and sometimes perhaps too much as well. So we need to balance it. European Investment Bank did a study a couple of years ago. They used a consulting organization called Atkins to do that study, and they found that drones, particularly up until 2 years ago, were primarily being used for inspection purposes, for surveillance purposes, for maintenance. These were the three main categories. No doubt others as well, but these were the three. They forecasted that the commercial business in these categories would increase 3, possibly 4 times by 2030. And what was interesting was that they looked at the demand across the entire globe and they proportioned it continent by continent, and the trend was the same across the board. Now, we at Eurocontrol have a key role to play here. We are, for those of you who know us, you know us well, we want to ensure that the drones get integrated in the airspace in a safe, efficient, and secure manner. We work with our colleagues in ENAC, in ENAV, with D-Flight, Leonardo, many other organizations that are represented here. We work together. But let me give you a flavor of what we do before I invite my panelists on the table. We're effectively involved in all aspects of this process of safely integrating drones and eVTOLs in the airspace. We're heavily involved in R&D, or research and development, and innovative projects. Some of you sitting in this room actually work with us. We're very pleased to work with you. We have completed a number of CESAR projects, particularly looking at and researching the CESAR model and practices in the U1, U2, the basic practices. And those are now part of some of the regulations that have gone out. We are now involved in projects with a number of you and others where we're looking at new technologies. We're heavily involved in supporting EASA to provide technical and operational support in the regulation development and also in developing acceptable means of compliance and guidelines. You need these guidelines to easily implement regulations. We're involved with the EuroCAE Organization for Writing Standards. We are then heavily involved in developing concept of operations. In fact, my colleagues are sitting in the row, Andrew Haitley, Giancarlo Ferrara, and others. They have been involved from day one to write the concept of operations. We have recently released, as part of Chorus XUAM, the concept of operation for urban air mobility operations, and I think more work is going to be done in the future. We're also involved in trying to help member states to implement use space. And one of the things we get asked by member states, particularly, I'd say, non-aviation communities, such as the mayors and the city authorities who are not aviators, they ask us the question, simple question: we can't visualize what use space will look like. We like to look and feel and touch, and then we can visualize things, but we can't visualize an abstract thing like use space. How do we plan? How do we move forward to implement use space? To help them, what we are doing is we've teamed up with Airbus, for instance, and we're using their simulator, and we're gathering a lot of the data from cities around Europe, where we are asked to conduct airspace risk assessments. An airspace risk assessment is one of the mandatory requirements of use space regulation 664. When we do the airspace risk assessment, and one of the previous panelists talked a little bit about it, we look at the current configuration of the airspace above a city, and we look at the population density on the ground. And we then highlight the risks and threats and possible mitigations for how we can integrate drones and eVTOLs in there. It is indeed up to the city then, authorities, to find out what their objectives are and how far they want to go. And if the current configuration does not allow them, they would need to reconfigure their airspace. So we take that data, we put it into the simulator that we have from Airbus, and we're trying to develop visual use case scenarios which we want to work with the stakeholders of use space to help them understand what it might look like when it's implemented. We're also trying to build capabilities to develop a drone data hub or a data platform. And some of you sitting in this room are working with us to try and see how we can gather that data, and then impartially, on behalf of the industry, the European industry, we want to analyze that data and come back to you and work with you to find out the factors that implement or that influence the reliability of drones or drone flights. What factors implement or influence drones in weather, different kinds of weather, bad weather, good weather? When do you lose the command, the C2 link, the command and control link between a drone and the ground station, and what to do if such a thing were to happen, and so on and so forth. So we're involved in a number of those, and of course, we're heavily involved in supporting member states to deploy the use space. Now, these are just some high-level views. What I'd like to do now is to